Hello. So welcome to the podcast. I'm just going to be talking about what makes us human and when do we draw the line between non-human and human. So I would like to point out that I think culture is a fundamental part of what makes us human. And when we start to see culture in our early ancestors is when we can draw the line between non-human and humans. I would also like to point out that, we took a look at primates and how they've speciated and evolved over time. So prosimians, monkeys, apes. I did my primate paper on the orangutan. But, you can kind of see, those species, how they've bottlenecked, how they've changed and differentiated over time, and the variation in these species because of geological locations, where they are, what has happened to them. And I think looking at primates sets a foundation for also looking at humans and early human species and where do we, become human. But culture is a fundamental part of what makes us us. It is through culture that we learn values, beliefs, behaviors, and customs to shape our, social interactions and understanding the world around us. And I think it becomes hard because, we can't tell what happened in the past. We have things in the fossil record. We have found all of these things. We have evidence that suggests certain things and, use of complex social things. But we don't know how they were. We don't know how they acted. But culture sets up communication. It provides us with a shared language and a system of communication that enables us to express our thoughts, feelings, and ideas to one another. Communication also, linguistics would fall under that. And, language is also it's an identity thing, and it changes where you are, geographically. And it is also what, differentiates modern humans from one another. Culture also sets up identity for us. It helps us develop our sense of self and a framework for understanding who we are and where we came from, as well as our place in society. I know we didn't really talk about culture in class. We began to when we were talking about like modern humanism and how we populated the world. But I think if we, dive into culture, I know it's hard to look at culture when you weren't living, 3 million years ago. But yes, I think culture is very important. Culture also gives us a sense of socialization and how we interact with each other, and it teaches us norms and values of our society. We learn how to behave in certain situations and how to relate to different people. And culture gives us creativity, and culture does give us an understanding of evolution. And it's a dynamic force that changes over time. It adapts to changing circumstances, and it reflects the collective experiences and our goals as a society. I think this line is drawn when we have fossils from early Homo erectus. Physiologically, we've looked at our early human ancestors, and physiologically, yes, we are very different. So the early Homo erectus species, our cranial capacities are much larger. Early Homo erectus had a cranial capacity that was significantly larger than early hominins, and this suggests that they had a larger brain and more advanced cognitive abilities. Their body size was larger, and they needed diet-wise, they needed much more. And the Homo species, the Homo erectus species, we also begin to see tool making. So early Homo erectus was the first hominin species to consistently use stone tools. And, in some of the presentations we've seen during class, we have seen the stone tools that they've made. And another question that was also brought up was, was this just a rock that was found, or was this actually made to be a stone tool? And I think when we're trying to look at the past, that also becomes very difficult because it's, we found this. Was it a symbol for something else, or was it something spontaneous? Yeah. And in early Homo erectus, we also see migration. So they were the first species to make. So we're originated in Africa, and we see this species branch out into Asia, Europe, and possibly even as far as Southeast Asia. So again, when we begin to see the incorporation of culture into the everyday lives of a species, I think that's when we can separate the line between non-human species and humans. Homo erectus was the first hominin species to consistently use stone tools. They've created a variety of tools like hand axes, cleavers, and choppers, which were more sophisticated and efficient than those made by earlier hominins. Stone tools were used for various purposes, such as butchering animals, preparing plants, and possibly even for digging. So again, it's speculation of what they did at the time, but their diets showed like what they needed, and it shows a higher thinking. And I think this higher thinking and the usage of stone tools is also seen in modern human behavior, right? Our diets, what we need to eat and survive. In terms of art, I think art is very important because we can see the art, and we can see things like cave drawings. In terms of art, there is limited evidence of like artistic expression from Homo erectus, but some believe that some of the drawings had significant meaning. And was this, again, it's hard to speculate, because was this a symbol for something else, or did someone just draw it? And it's kind of difficult to draw conclusions about artistic abilities or cultural practices, but the evidence suggests that they have had the cognitive ability to create and use the tools for a variety of purposes, and they may have had capacity for symbolic thought and expression. When we begin to see cultural practices, we also begin to see, things like warfare. So again, socialization is a big part of culture, and I think when we look at our ancestors and, people like Homo erectus and other early ancestors, when we start to see warfare, that is a sign that there is conflict and interaction with each other and incorporation of culture, because conflict was, is a part of culture. We also begin to see things like cannibalism culturally, and I think it's important to note that just like modern humans, since our cultures are really, different from one another's, and how we were brought up and how we were raised, I think it is okay to suggest that our early ancestors' cultures were also very different, and they varied between one another. I would also like to emphasize again, like, when we are looking at like the skulls, like our skull activity, like you can see us change over time from like a modern human skull. Our brow ridges become smaller, our sagittal crests become, we don't have one, or they've become smaller over time. But it's, again, is this, just variation within a species, or is this different? Is this a different species? And I think, and I also think that 3 million years from now, when we're being studied and our skulls are in the dirt and we're being studied, I think the same problems will arise, because my skull is not going to look like the dude that just walked past. Again, is this a different species, or is this just one species with a lot of variation? Because again, we're all different, our diets are different, our statures are different. And again, I would like to emphasize that I think Homo erectus is really the transitional species between non-humans and humans. Thanks for listening.